Good morning, King Alex. How are you?
Hello, hello.
My king. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
All right, how you doing? It's good to hear your voice.
Good to hear yours, brother. I am excited to talk to you today. Every time we go to have a conversation, I'm just in shock and awe that you climbed to the top of Everest. It's just something I can't imagine. It's just thinking about heights give me fear. I am not good on roller coasters. I'm definitely never crawling across crevices that are hundreds of feet deep on ladders. That's not happening in my life. I am not on the hunt for that. I am very grateful that you have done it and that you're willing to share your story with us. So welcome today, King Alex Harz. How are you? What's going on? How's life?
It's good. I can't complain. Yesterday, ironically, is International Everest Day. So, kind of puts us all in
Let's go.
perspective.
Perfect timing.
Absolutely, and the only thing that I'm missing right now is I'm not in Kathmandu celebrating with the Sherpas, International Everest Day. But outside of that, I can't complain. And it's good to talk to you. And it's good to talk to everything about Everest and some of the things that you wouldn't ever want to do.
Amen. Amen. For those just tuning in here, the Quest series is Alex's production series. He has climbed to the top of Everest, several others as well, training. But he climbed to the top of Everest and filmed it in 360 and traditional. And it is streaming on Rad TV. You can go climb to the top of Everest with Alex. And the first time we spoke about this months ago, was incredible just to hear the production pieces of what you're thinking about with microphones and batteries and cameras and all the little stuff that you need for a production, but now you have to take it to the top of Everest. It's so much to think about, and it's so mind-blowing. And I left that conversation with 1,000 other questions I could ask you, and I just feel it's so fun to talk about this because it's rare. How many people have climbed to the top of Alex? Do you know how many people have made it?
Yeah, somewhere since 1953, somewhere around 6,000 people, something like that. So not too many. If you add that up over the course of 72 years, not that many people have had that fortune to stand on the top of Everest. But again, I'm humbly honored to have done so and to have come down with the content to now share with the world, which of course didn't make it any easier. But on the same token, it now makes it a lot more fulfilling because it wasn't just about me standing on the summit of Everest. It was more about sharing this experience with the rest of the world, knowing that 99% of the world will never have the opportunity or interest to climb Everest. So, yeah, it's one of those things that is very special, near and dear to me. And of course, this time of the year, it makes it even more special because it kind of brings back all these memories and also discussions with people that are interested in talking about it.
I bet. I mean, anybody that's interested in talking about it looks to you like you're Michael Jordan right away, right? Is that the energy you get? It's like you're the man right away.
I get quite a bit. I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of quick fire questions because people have them all bundled up in them, and so they're not really slowing down to ask each one. So they want to know so many questions, so many answers at the same time. So which I enjoy. I really do, because at the end of the day, these are the things that you don't really get to know unless you either get to talk to someone that's fortunate enough like me to have climbed the mountain, or if you've been there yourself, and there's a lot of stuff like we talked about, a couple months ago, that you just wouldn't know unless either you watch these films or you've been there. That is just something that you wouldn't know about Everest in the bigger picture and context of the mountain as it relates to Nepal and the people that live around it and the Sherpas and so on. So, yeah, to me, it's always interesting because there's so much educational value to it, and it's such a fascinating place because it is, arguably the most iconic landmark on the planet, and also the most iconic human adventure experience, since 1953 when it was first climbed, actually May 29th, 1953, and that's why it's International Everest Day is on May 29th.
Wow. So do you know anything about that? Like, what was that? Did you research that at all, of the first climb, and what's the story behind that? If you know any of it, can share anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically it was like a military style siege. It was an English team that went there, and they did it basically like a British Army siege of the mountain. And previous years, the Swiss were there the year before, and there was expeditions in 51 and 52 trying to get higher and higher up on the mountain, and they never made it up any higher than the high point that they reached at that time. So in 53, it was still, a lot of it was still blind. Okay, we knew, all right, we're going to try to get to the ice fall, but of course that changes every year. They probably didn't know so much about the dynamics of the ice fall as people do today, where it moves 3 to 6 feet every single day downhill. So it's constantly moving. The path is never the same. And seracs are collapsing, avalanches, so on, and crevasses are getting wider as the season goes on. And so the route is never the same. So even with the 53 team that finally made it to the summit, they would not have known exactly what route to take based off of the 52 team, because that's not the same routes, so every year they got to set a different route. And so the beta wasn't really there like it is today. So they were going up the mountain, and the two people that ultimately summit were Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. When they summited on May 29th, they weren't the guys that were essentially set out to go for the summit. They were almost the last man standing, and they're like, okay, well, next man up. You guys are the last ones left. You guys want to try this? And they did, and they actually made it, against all the odds, and again, going kind of blind into the unknown. So yeah, it wasn't, it didn't turn out the way it was expected to. It didn't turn out the way it was planned to, but nonetheless, because of Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay making it on May 29th, 1953, forever the Khumbu Valley, where Mount Everest sits in Nepal, and forever the mountain itself changed, because now it was a place that someone has been able to get to the top of, and now it brought a lot of publicity and highlight to the country of Nepal and to the Khumbu Valley and to the Sherpa people that live there. Because if you take away Mount Everest, which is at the dead end of the Khumbu Valley, and the other side of it is China or Tibet, depending on how you view it, their life would be completely different. If it wasn't for that fateful day, their life would be completely different, because the Sherpa people were traditionally Himalayan salt traders, and farmers, essentially, high altitude farmers. And now, they're engaged in tourism, trekking to Everest Base Camp and to the other mountains around, and also, once a year, people trying to go there and climb the mountain, which is what this time of the year is. So all because of that day, it changed for the Sherpa people's lives in the Khumbu Valley forever, even to the point where this time of year, it's the second richest place in Nepal, strictly because of, Amada Blam and Mount Everest and these mountains that have been exposed because of what happened on May 29th, 1953.
That is amazing, and thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting. Just being in sports in my life, it's interesting to have seen breakthroughs happen, physical break, like somebody breaking the 4-minute mile or whatever, and then it starts happening regularly. And it's kind of the same thing here. Like, this massive feat was accomplished, and that opens the door for like humans to say, oh, I can actually do that. And then people start doing it because they saw it was possible. Is that like, did they turn it into a tourist destination right away? Or was it, do you know, like any of the postscript of that, of like, when did it become efficient or something that was an actual business that was happening around the base of the mountain? And now it's not even like just the base. I mean, from the stories you're describing with all the different base camps, those are like each their own little city and their own little operation that's different than of the others because of distance, height, whatever. I don't even know. I'm just saying the words that I'm thinking right now, but like, it seems like this would take, like any ecosystem or any niche business does, a lot of development. But I guess if the Sherpas could do it, like how do they prepare to be able to service this? It's just such a wild thing to think there's a group of people waiting to take you up a mountain, and that's what they do.
Yeah, and there was a large gap between the first time it was climbed and the second time it was climbed, essentially 10 years, until it was then climbed for the first time on the other side of the mountain, the north side of the mountain, from the Chinese or Tibetan side. So it wasn't something that then happened every year thereafter. There was huge gaps, and where no one was climbing the mountain or wasn't able to get up the mountain. And it wasn't until the 90s that all of a sudden the idea of, okay, let's take trained mountaineers to Everest and let's see if we can climb this as essentially not necessarily as a tourist industry, because it's not that. It's more like, let's see if we can take trained mountaineers and climb this as a community of people that wanted to climb the mountain. And so that was the first time that really started happening. Prior to that, it was just these one-off expeditions that would go to either try to climb it without oxygen or try to go up another route and so on. But not until the 90s did it become something, well, yeah, this might actually be something where a company could plan the logistics in conjunction with the Sherpa people that work and live in the valley to try to take people from all across the world that are either professional climbers or highly trained climbers to go and try to climb Mount Everest. So it was a huge gap. I mean, over a 40-year gap before it got to that point, but it was essentially the groundwork of those years, of those 40 years leading up to the 90s that said, okay, we could now kind of, like you said, service this by the villages, because it takes 9 days to trek to base camp. So you just don't show up at Everest Base Camp. You have to walk to Everest Base Camp. And so you're going through the different villages in the Khumbu Valley, and you stop at these different villages to get acclimatized to the increasing, higher altitude that you're achieving, because base camp itself is at 17,500 feet, and it lies on the world's highest glacier, the Khumbu Glacier. So just getting to base camp in its own right is a bucket list thing, because 17,500 feet is nothing to kind of just blindly wave a pencil at. It's a little bit of an endeavor, and there's a lot of genetics that come into play, because a lot of people can't even go to 17,500 feet, even if they were in the physical condition to get there. Genetically, their body's not designed to acclimatize to that thin air. And the thing is, you don't really know until you go. So you got to kind of try it to see how high you can actually get. And of course, Everest stands at 29,032 feet at the summit. So you're not even close to the top by the time you get to base camp. You still got another 12,000 feet you got to go to try to get to the top. So, over those years, the villages started to say, okay, we can support, trekkers here. We'll build a tea lodge here, and where accommodations where people can spend the night, or places where they can put their tent, out in front of our houses, and we'll serve them tea and food, and then send them on their way down the trail. So this was all, took a lot of time, and eventually, once the 90s came around, it became a feasible endeavor for groups from all around the world to go there on a kind of a commercial perspective to try to climb the mountain. And then since then, more and more has been learned. The technology, the mountain itself, the equipment's gotten better. You've got now dedicated people that just fix ropes to get through the ice fall. They're called the ice fall doctors. Their only job is to maintain the route from base camp to Camp 1, which is where the Khumbu Icefall lies in between, and so you've got a very structured system of management of how the mountain is operated, for those 2 months of the year that people try to climb the mountain, in the springtime.
Very interesting. Who's paying for that, for like the ice operations? Is that like Nepal state-oriented business that they?
Yeah, it's operated by the SPCC, which is the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, and the Sagarmatha is the national park where Mount Everest sits. And so it's almost like if you went to a national park in the United States, like Yellowstone or something, the rangers there that maintain Yellowstone and the different stations and spots where you can go and visit, it's the same kind of thing. They've got a dedicated workforce that's there to help manage the park, and then the SPCC, which manages all the operations on Mount Everest, from trash removal to, like I said, the icefall doctors. They are basically funded by the expeditions themselves. So the expeditions have to pay a fee. For example, the summit fee is $11,000 per person. It's going to be bumped up to $15,000 per person. So that's just for a piece of paper that gives you the opportunity to try to make it to the summit. That doesn't guarantee anything else. That's just Nepal saying, okay.
Wait a second. How much is it? 15 grand to have, just to be having a conversation about it, really?
That's right. Just to have a conversation about it. And if you don't make it, too bad. If you turn around, too bad. If you don't even get it to base camp, too bad. But wow. Every climber that's trying to get to the summit of Everest, from the Nepal side, has to pay $11,000 or $15,000 if you're not an actual Sherpa themselves, right? So then they're being funded by those fees, as well as the expeditions themselves that hire and employ the Sherpas and porters and stuff to carry gear to base camp, to fly helicopters to base camp, and then to also set the route and go up the mountain. So yeah, it's a whole system that's essentially become funded now by those commercial operations that first started going there in the 90s.
Amazing. I have so many questions for you. So I'm just going to start asking them. They're no order, and I'm sure we'll take a lot of tangents. And again, King Alex, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us. Anyone who hasn't listened to our first couple chats, you can find them on Rad. They're everywhere now. You can find them on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your content. Just search for Alex Harz or Rad NFTV, and you will find the show. The first time we spoke, he goes into super detail about preparation, the climb itself, and it is a fantastic conversation. There's a bunch of clips everywhere. Go check it out. And today we're kind of just going to add on top of that, almost part two. And I have a bunch of questions we didn't get to previously that are kind of, some of them are fun and quirky, and some are like probably questions you've never been asked before that I just didn't like. It's not the question you ask when you're still learning about the journey. So I'm really glad to have this opportunity to ask you these questions. So, one question I have is about training, and it was, what did you learn during training, or something that you learned during training that still wasn't enough for the real, like it didn't prepare you? You trained, you thought you had it, but then you're on the mountain and you're like, oh shit, there's no training for this, or whatever it was.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I would say the first thing that, all the training I did, I trained 2 to 3 hours a day for 7 days a week for a calendar year leading up to my departure to Kathmandu. I didn't take a single day off. I had a full routine that I followed religiously. This day I was doing this day I was doing this.
Are you doing like working out in the gym? Is this like a 5-day split? What are you climbing stairs? What's
so
the deal?
I can tell you the whole routine I had, and basically the way it was on Mondays, I would run 10 to 15 miles. So I'd run 10 to 15 miles every Monday. And then Tuesdays, I would do heavy pack work. So I'd put somewhere between 25 to 65 pounds of weight in my backpack. Early on, I started with 25. By the time I was getting closer to leaving Nepal, I was up to 65. And I was doing between 1,000 and 1,500 step-ups on park benches. So I live near a park at that time in the middle of Denver, the big city park as it's known. And I would walk around to every park bench. There was 24 of them. And I would do 40 step-ups on each one of these. I'd go up, over, down, up, over, down, up, over, down, hour after hour after hour. And I did it, between 1,000 to 1,500 of those with the heavy pack weight. And so what that did is simulate stepping up, going up steep gradients, going up ladders in the ice fall, climbing over ice blocks, these kind of things. And also that sliding motion going left and right was good for stability, balance in the knees, right? Because of course you need to have good, strong knees or stable knees, because you're not just going straight forward, you're going side to side. Sometimes you have to go sideways.
Sometimes you got to go down a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Exactly. Like climbing or like down climbing a tree. You got to point your feet and find the right position to get purchase, because the whole time you're on these spikes known as crampons, which is what digs your purchase into the snow. Without those, you'd slide right down the hill. So you have to be able to be very tactical on where you point your feet and where you put your spikes in order to have enough purchase on the mountain so you're able to make that step, to make that move. So then on Wednesdays, I would do hill climbs or hill sprints, so I would just run hill sprints, stair sprints, hill sprints, stair sprints, for the cardio aspect, again, to have that anaerobic bursting ability. Because what I realized, I was a former soccer player in college. What I realized from all the research I did, that some of the people that did best on Mount Everest were soccer players and hockey players. And the reason why is because they had a very strong cardio foundation, from running, but they had a very strong anaerobic foundation from bursting, chasing after a ball, going after a puck, so at any moment, if they needed to turn on the jets, they could. And that is key, because, for example, marathon runners, distance runners, what you don't get is, running, you get in this metronomic kind of a procedure where you're just going step
breathing
after
perfect
step.
in step.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
Same pace, step after step after step, mile after mile after mile, which is good for cardio. But what it doesn't do is when you hit that wall, you're done. you have nothing left in the tank. It's kind of like having a 4-cylinder turbocharged car that has 265 horsepower, and you try to get 267 out of it, you blow the heads off the engine, right? Because you just can't get any more. It's just fine-tuned to that maximum amount of RPMs. So what if you do this anaerobic stuff that hockey players and soccer players, for example, do, then you have, when you need to call on that burst to get that extra 50 yards or get those final steps, you have that in your reserve, which you normally wouldn't have if you only train cardio. So I did that anaerobic training on Wednesdays. Thursdays, I do only upper body. So this was also because you're jumaring, which is basically you're using your arms and your lats and your biceps and your triceps to pull up on the rope. The whole mountain essentially gets roped from the ice fall all the way to the summit. So, these are safety lines, that you clip into. So if you fall, that hopefully an anchor catches you. So you clip into these ropes, but you use those ropes also. You can use your upper body in many of those places to jumar or to pull yourself up to a large degree, or take weight off your quads and calves for a little bit. So that was something that was really good to do: bicep, tricep, chest, lats, upper body stuff. Friday, I ran 10 to 15 miles again. Saturday, I did those step ups with heavy packs again. Sundays, I would do hill sprints, intervals, or go hiking up in the mountains, to actual simulate backpack work and go up in the mountains. And then Monday, I started all over again. I did that for a course of 52 weeks with no exceptions, no breaks, stopped drinking for a whole year, the whole 9. I actually had my first bit of alcohol at Everest Base Camp when I was interviewing one of the guys in the movie that you see in the 2D film, who was a legend, and actually one of the guys who started commercial climbing on Everest in the 90s. His name is Russell Bryce. And people that ever watched the Discovery Channel Beyond the Limit series that he had, you're quite familiar with Russell Bryce. And he's an iconic figure in Everest because he went there for like 37 years as a commercial operator. So, a true legend. And I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to him and interview him for about 2.5 hours. And he offered me this bourbon, this homemade bourbon that he brought to Everest Base Camp every year with his own mash of cherry, almost like a vermouth, to put in there. And of course, me and my cameraman, had no intention on doing any kind of drinking. But when Russell Bryce hands over a rocks glass with ice in it and some whiskey right in front of you, you're drinking it.
That's hilarious. I was going to ask, did anything cross your mind of fuck it, might as well have a drink because we're going to climb Everest? It could be your last drink. Does that even cross your mind?
I think it was more about just kind of easing down the situation a little bit because, unfortunately, I didn't just have to focus about climbing. I also had to focus about filming, my camera team and the production, setting up interviews at base camp, and so on. So, I was so hyper focused on the day-to-day task of what is it going to take to get this content. And then of course we have to climb the mountain, which, took us 43 days, from base camp to the summit and back. So it's not just a short endeavor. It takes a long time to move up and down the mountain, acclimatize your body to the increasing lack of oxygen. So therefore produce more red blood cells. That's basically what you're doing. You're shocking your body into producing more red blood cells so you can breathe at higher altitudes. And so all that takes time. So you actually go up and down the mountain a couple of times before you actually go for the summit. And so, all of that focus on that, I think what that drink did, matter of fact, I ended up having 2 of them, was really just kind of bring me back to a stasis I'm just hanging out here in a tent with a buddy talking. Versus, I'm hyper focused on interviewing this legend by the name of Russell. So it actually helped.
It brought your nerves down and probably made you feel good and okay, I can do this. A little lift of courage in the moment.
It was like a bonding thing, right, between Russell and I. Because prior to that, I only met him a couple days earlier. I was introduced to him by my expedition leader, Ryan Waters, who was a friend of his. And so he said, "Hey, Russell, you should sit down and talk to Alex. He's doing these really cool productions here, and he's getting some really interesting content that you don't see in Everest films. Would you like to be interviewed about your backstory and about the history of Everest and all this stuff?" And that's what we did. And so more of almost like that icebreaker situation. Yeah, okay, I'll sit down and have some whiskey with this guy.
What a term for this.
So it was it was a whole thing like that. But that was my training regimen leading up to it. But when I got into the ice fall, you can throw it all out the window, because now you're crawling on ladders, which you wouldn't do anywhere else in the world. There's no other mountain in the world where you would climb through in a 2.5 mile long ice fall of Jenga blocks that are falling over and moving 3 to 6 feet downhill on a daily basis to get to a summit of a mountain, except for on Mount Everest. But if you want to get to the summit of Everest on the Nepal side, that is one of the objective dangers you have to go through. And so all that training I had, throw it right out the window, because now you're stepping on ladders that are tied together with fishing twine, and they're moving up and down about 3 feet, because sometimes you have 3 or 4 or 5 ladders tied together in order to make it across this large crevasse that are spanning, into this darkness, and it moves up and down and sways, and you only have about 1 inch on the front of your toes on those crampons again, and 1 inch on the back of your toe on your heels on those crampons to touch those rungs and go across these Home Depot style ladders to try to make it across these crevasses. So there is no training that prepares you for that.
Did anybody try to talk you out of this, Alex?
There were.
What was
there
that?
were quite a few people that did try to talk me out of it. Luckily, I had enough people that also supported me, so it was kind of that, that devil on one shoulder, angel on the other,
Sure.
and you have that balance, of justice of what's the right decision here. And ultimately, I went with my gut, and I went with the few people that had a real strong support for me. And so, I ended up doing it. But there was plenty of people. As a matter of fact, my body was telling me, every time you're on that mountain, everywhere you're moving on that mountain, you're lying to yourself. Your body does not want to be there. There's never been a civilization that's lived above 17,000 feet. That's why if you stay there indefinitely, you will die. And so therefore, your body is telling you, what are you doing here? You can't taste anything anymore. Your digestive system shuts down at altitude. Your immune system shuts down. Everything in your body is screaming just survival. Take care of the hearts. Take care of the brain and the lungs, and that is it. And so you're constantly lying to yourself to keep going another 50 feet, another 50 feet, another 50 feet. And so, my body was telling me, get out of here as well.
All right. So now that you bring up, like you said, digestive system, sorry for anyone that's going to be offended by this. Not really sorry, just preparing you. How do you even take a shit at like 20,000 feet or whatever? Like your digestive system shuts down, and like your body's so focused on doing other things and keeping you warm, keeping you alive. Like what is, and I'm really asking, I'm not being facetious, like what is the real process of like using the bathroom at negative 40 degrees, whether you're 1 or 2, what are you even doing at that point?
Yeah.
Like, what's it like?
Yeah, very good question. Well, there's a couple things. First and foremost, you're almost like a pigeon. Everything just kind of passes through you. Most of it doesn't even get digested properly, because your body is burning so many calories every day just to survive. And so depending on where you're on the mountain, you could be burning between 3,000 to 20,000 calories a day.
Oh
I lost 27 pounds of muscle mass, Cameron. I mean, when I left Denver, I was in the best shape of my life, better than when I was playing college soccer. I was 197 pounds, 4 to 6% body fat. By the time I got back to Kathmandu 52 days later, after climbing the mountain, I was 170 pounds. I looked like I escaped a North Korean death camp. And so your body is just eating itself away. Well, what that does is that essentially you're constantly starving. You're constantly anemic. Your body is just struggling to maintain. So you're not really doing too many number twos. In base camp, you will, because you eat like a pig. You try to put anything you can in you. There's no such thing as bad calories at altitude. You could eat just straight tubs of Crisco. You could eat 50 Snickers bars and drink 2 liters of Mountain Dew. It does not make a difference. It's not a bad calorie. Right. Everywhere else in the world, horrible choice. But up there, no, not a bad choice. So you're not actually going number 2 all that often. Number 1, you will be a lot, because you're drinking so much water to stay hydrated. You have to drink 3 liters to 8 liters a day just to stay hydrated, because you're in such a hypoxic environment. Your body is dehydrating. Your cells need the water in order to keep it from turning into sludge, your blood into sludge, which then, leads to a different set of medical problems that can arise. And so, you're going to the bathroom, you're going to number 1 quite a bit, number 2, not so much. But if you are in a number 2 situation.
Not number 2 for 52 days.
No, I did. But as you go higher in the mountain, it becomes less and less. So let's say Camp 1, there is no place to go at Camp 1. At base camp, they have these little tiny tents that are basically surrounded by a barrel. So you have like a 65-gallon drum that has a toilet seat on top of it, and you're sitting on top of a drum. And essentially that's what you're doing. And then when that drum is filled up, they seal it up, they put it on a yak, and they send it down valley to Namche or Lukla, and then they fly it back to Kathmandu, or they dispose it somewhere in the valley. So that's how that works. And so you have this little tiny tent. It looks like a shower tent, like a New York studio apartment where you just have a little bit of a curtain around an old 1924 bathtub, and you're standing in that, and that's how you go to the bathroom if you're doing a number 2. If you're going up, once you get to Camp 1, that's not the case. Now you have to kind of do this thing called digging a cat hole. So you dig this trench with your ice axe, and then you go into that trench, assuming it's away from a crevasse or anywhere where you can fall that's dangerous, and you dig that there, and then you cover it up with snow. However, that has changed now. Starting this year, what's happened is you now have to carry everything down. All your number 2s have to come back down in a plastic bag.
Oh my gosh.
So you tie it to your ice axe, you tie it to your backpack.
Oh my
God. And you bring it back down. Yep.
Oh my God. So and something you brought up in the first time we spoke was how dangerous it is to be getting up to do, even to take a leak in the middle of the night, because you're disoriented, you're tired, you're on the side of a mountain, and just taking a few steps away from the tent is even a dangerous feat when you're delusional and tired and been climbing all day.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially on Camp 3. Camp 3 is probably the most dangerous place to go to the bathroom on the mountain because it's stuck.
In the world.
Yeah, arguably in the world. It's
unless you're in a gunfight or a firefight in the middle of the war or something.
Right. And you really had to go, and you decided to go in the house that's being shelled.
Right.
Yeah. Because Camp 3 is an interesting place. So between Camp 2 and Camp 4, there's this 5,000-foot wall of ice known as the Lhotse Face, and that's basically the face to take you to the top of the 4th highest mountain, which is connected by a call to Everest, being the highest mountain. So you have to, in order to get to Camp 4, you have to go from Camp 2 up to Camp 4 by climbing this 5,000-foot wall of ice, the Lhotse Face. And there's only one spot where there's a little bit of an indentation in that wall of ice, and that is where Camp 3 is situated. And that's between 23,400 feet and 23,600 feet. Well, the problem is if you step outside your tent and you don't have your crampons on, which a lot of people do because you're hypoxic and you forget about it, and I want to step outside to go to the bathroom, versus laying in your sleeping bag and peeing in an Nalgene bottle, which is what you're supposed to do, and then dump it out the side of your window of your tent. Well, people have died literally just going outside their tent, forgetting that they don't have their crampons on, just to go take a pee on the side of the Lhotse Face. Well, it's just straight glass, and they slide down the hill to their death, on something that stupid.
Oh my gosh. It makes my palms sweat just thinking about that. I do not like heights. I just don't mess with heights, and thinking to myself, just stepping out on ice. Anybody here's done that. You stepped on ice and slid 4 feet that you didn't intend to before, and now you're on the side of a mountain. See you later.
Yep, that's it. And it's happened. And then, of all the ways to go on Everest, that's not one of the ways you probably want to go down in the history books. He died going to the bathroom at Camp 3.
How much weight did you say you lost? I'm sorry to go back to that, but I wanted to...
27 pounds of muscle mass.
Jeez.
I didn't lose fat, which I wish I would have lost fat, but unfortunately I was so lean and so in such good physical condition that when I left, I had no fat to burn, and it was just muscle. And
you're burning a half pound a day.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I just lost more weight in my life than I've ever lost since I was a young man. I came into the beginning of this year at 205 to 208, but the day I weighed myself was 208. It was a little heavier, so I took it. And I've lost 20 pounds in that time. And so I'm down 20 pounds, whatever.
Awesome.
I have been at a caloric deficit since January 6th, January 7th-ish. And I've lost 0.15 pounds per day as my average. And I have been hungry. Lifting heavy weights and taking protein, I've been hungry. And I cannot imagine a half pound. It's 3 times more than what I'm doing, and you're in the most grueling conditions ever with no off days, no off time. You just got to go. You can't train for that, right? There's no. Did you even try to be at a caloric deficit before and try to be as lean as you could be?
What I tried to do, and the problem is, I was training so hard and I was trying to eat so much to actually gain weight, like fat. The ideal situation is to come 25 pounds of fat on you because you'll
Amen.
burn
I
that all
bet.
off. That would be the ideal scenario, is if you go to Everest with 25 pounds of fat on, because by the time you're done, it's gone. So the key is, how can you be in physical shape, the cardio that you need, and be in the right physical shape to
Tough.
climb the mountain, but still
Tough.
carry 25 pounds of excess fat, right? So that was very hard. And to me, it didn't work out. It didn't happen. Other people have been successful in being able to do that. But what you can do is how you train. And I was cognizant on my cardio days, because I was running a marathon in half a week, right? So on my cardio days, what I would do, I would try to run at about 65 to 75% of my maximum heart rate. The reason why is, over years, physiologists and stuff have figured out, and it actually started with a guy, the Michael Jordan of Everest climbing, high altitude mountaineer, and of all time, is a guy named Reinhold Messner. And he climbed Everest. He was the first guy to climb without oxygen when they thought it was physically, humanly impossible to do that, to go to 29,000 feet without oxygen. He was the first one to climb it by himself, the soul of the mountain, when again they thought that was suicide, and of course it was, but he made it. And what they did find out about Reinhold Messner's technique was, he trained in that target range of between 65 to 75% of his maximum heart rate, because what that does, it causes your body to burn your fat reserves versus the calories in your stomach, in your digestive system. And everybody, to the most part, unless they're hyper lean, has a couple 100,000 calories of fat in their body, on their legs, on their arms, around their stomach, their butt, and so on, that they can then access if you train your body to burn that fat. And so I was trying to do that while I was training, but ultimately by the time I left, I was so lean that I didn't really have anything to lean on with regards to fat when I got to base camp and
Sure.
started going up the hill.
So you mentioned this previously, of like pushing through the mental walls, and like you just got to keep going. It's to the next thing, to the next thing. How are you doing? Like, did you start doing that during your training? And I've ran before, and I hate running. It's not what I do. I don't like it at all. But when you are running, your body does that. Your brain does this weird thing of like, oh, if I just get to the sign, I made it to the sign off. I just go to the telephone pole, the next pole, or to the end of the block, and you kind of trick yourself in these increments. Were you even able to do that? Are you like chipping away at the elevation mentally of like, just this much further, just this much further? And what process is going on as you're breaking through those mental barriers over and over and over and over and over and over again for 52 days? How do you keep going there? What's the thing that keeps you moving?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a twofold answer. First and foremost, yep, exactly what you said is 100% right. You're constantly lying to yourself. You're becoming basically an internal congenital liar to yourself. You're like, okay, if I make it,
Just delusion
just
at peak
illusion.
delusion. Yeah.
Yep. You say, okay, all I got to do is get to that block of ice, and then I got it. Then you get to that block of ice, say, okay, now I just got to get to that next block of ice, and then I got it. And then I got to get there. And you're right. The difference between, it was so interesting because it's more like a pitch. My eyeballs pitched lower and lower the higher I got up the mountain. So as I started the climb, I would look more straight ahead, the grandiose stuff, the Lhotse face, or let's say I would see, Nuptse over here. I'd see Lhotse. I'd see the West Shoulder. I'd see the ice wall in front of me. Just the amazing beauty and grandeur in front of me. But then as I got higher and higher, I would tilt my eyes down to 10 feet in front of me, 8 feet in front of me, 3 feet in front of me. And so I wouldn't be discouraged by how far away I still had to get, right?
Just one more step.
That's it. Just one more step, one more step, one more step, on the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of steps later, and you get there. And then the other thing that kind of kept me lying to myself was my focus on the project itself, on filming. Okay, I got to film this in VR, and then I got to film this in 2D. So now I'm hyper focused on the production, and so that served me well in many places, especially like in the Kumbu Icefall or on the Hillary Step and the Cornice Traverse, where you have this massive exposure where you make one mistake, it's over, because it's like that war reporter scenario. And I think we may have mentioned this the last time. So imagine if you're somewhere in the world documenting a conflict, and you're just a reporter. Well, you have combatants, the Russians and the Ukrainians, for example, shooting at each other, and you're just there documenting it. So therefore, you don't think you're going to get hit. Therefore, you don't think you're part of the conflict because, hey, I don't have a gun in my hand. I'm not a Ukrainian. I'm not a Russian. I'm not shooting at the other guy. I'm just filming this. Well, unfortunately, a lot of bullets go astray because not everybody's the best shot. B, they're shooting automatic weapons oftentimes, so that's not the most accurate. And then C, a lot of the times they don't want people knowing what's going on, so they actually shoot at the journalists. So I had this false sense of security, like a war reporter hiding behind my lens, filming me walking across these 5 ladders tied together by fishing string to go across a crevasse,
so crazy.
versus worrying about me falling or being focused of getting across that ladder, because if I made a mistake, I'm going 500 feet down into that darkness, right? So it gave me this false sense of security at times, but it also gave me that false sense of security that could have got me in trouble, because I wasn't so focused on the dangers around me at all times. So, it's kind of a catch-22. It's kind of a double-edged sword, but that was also something that helped me. It kept me going because I knew I had to get this footage as well.
Man, so I'm wondering, and like I said, I'm going to be jumping all around here because I got a bunch of questions. So, are you approaching everything in your life now with the same tenacity and game plan that you did Everest? And I'm wondering does it feel easier to accomplish things not on a mountain now? Like is like a goal that would be lofty for somebody else, just like, nothing, I'll do it, whatever. Who cares if it takes 3 months or 6 months or a year, or 52 days? At least it's not 52 days on a mountain. Have you applied this to everything now, or was that
Yeah.
a different period?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's a good question. The first thing I had noticed, or the first thing that probably came directly from that, is that the daily things don't bug you as much. Oh, the Amazon guy said he was going to be there today, and he's not going to be there till tomorrow. Or it was Memorial Day weekend, so the trash guy didn't come and pick up our trash cans. Little things that drive you nuts, or road rage, or going, in traffic. These things that normally irritate you because of our everyday modern life just aren't as severe anymore, because you can put it in perspective that, what, it's really not that big of a deal. That's the first thing, where maybe my outlook has changed a little bit. And the other thing is, you're right. I tell myself, look, if I was able to film, a couple productions on Mount Everest and climb the mountain and make it there and back, and to be fortunate to have done so, I think that if I put that same kind of dedication to another endeavor, I'm pretty confident that I might be able to achieve that, because I was able to prove this concept of how difficult things can be, by going to Mount Everest and to filming those productions, and to be able to, again, humbly honored to have climbed the mountain. So you're absolutely right. Everything else doesn't seem quite as difficult maybe in the initial outset, because I know that I can always dig 20% deeper to achieve my objectives, because that's one thing that I had learned on Everest as well, is that in order to make it to the summit of Everest, you got to go harder, 20% harder than anything you ever done in your life. Otherwise, you're not going to make it up there. But that's also the fine line between possibly living and dying, and also whether you make it or not. There's 345 people that have died up there, and every single one of those people were type A kind of people that were highly trained, highly motivated, right? And so the margins between the ones that made it up and down versus the ones that either never made it or the ones that never came back home are as thin as a strand of hair. So it's that extra 20% that you need to achieve your objective, but that's also that extra 20% that you didn't realize you had that could have also gotten you killed. So a lot of things get kind of put in perspective after something like this, but the ability to push through, I think, is maybe the thing that you're alluding to that really has served me since.
Absolutely. I think, the taking one more step, and you talking about your focal point shifting down to where, and I see the video, I see you in the video, and early in the quest, you're looking up, you're often looking up, and then you're looking down at the ladder, and then at the end, you're looking straight down, like watching a leg come up, watch a leg come up, watch a leg. And it's like, you're right that you went from looking at the top of the mountain to looking to the next step. And that's a really interesting, I just never thought about that your perspective is coming down of, I'm going to climb the whole mountain. And then it slowly comes down to, I'm going to take the next step. And that's it's like boils down the essence of doing the thing. Anything that anybody's doing ever is take the next step. You're not climbing the whole fucking mountain today, no matter what mountain you're climbing. You're taking your steps today, and you've got to take the right few steps today and not fall off the mountain so you can keep climbing tomorrow. That applies to everything. You know, like, are you doing any like motivational speaking or anything using this energy?
I haven't done really much of that yet. It's something I wouldn't mind doing. I wouldn't mind getting into it. I did a presentation for the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America, and that was kind of an interesting thing because I thought, well, what does a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy or girl want to know about Mount Everest? And, why would they care about this? I figured they'd be more interested, in their TikTok videos and just staying on their phone. But I was totally surprised how engaged, a 12 or a 14-year-old kid was. Matter of fact, this 1 hour presentation, or it was only slated to be 45 minutes, turned into 3 hours and 20 minutes because they just kept asking more questions and more questions. And of course, the parents piped in and they wanted to know, And so, yeah, it's one of those things where if I can help, either put perspective to everyday life. For example, it's not really about climbing Mount Everest. It's about conquering your Everest, whatever that is in your life. Is that to try to get a project done in time? Is it for you to go on a bucket list adventure? Is it for you to go and on a vacation or to pay homage to an ancestor that might be buried halfway around the world because of a war and to go see their grave? Whatever that may be, is to conquer your own Everest by setting out your goal of what you want to achieve, be hyper focused like a sniper on that objective, and then do everything in the amount of time that you have in a given day. If it's only 1 hour that you might have, or if it's 10 hours that you have, utilize that time to make that objective a reality by conquering your own Everest. And really, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And so if I can help people, see that and to help motivate people to take that next step, like you said, in order to get to the end game, which is the summit of Everest, metaphorically, then I've done everything I possibly can, to kind of better someone's situation of what I can do, sitting in this position.
Amen, King. I'm inspired talking to you, and just, I know you're not like doing it to hype somebody up. You're just answering the questions, but it is super inspiring just to hear you put this in perspective. What's it like being at, I think negative 40? I think you said. Like, how does that work when so you're taking all that gear with you, but it's getting colder as you climb. What does that even feel like? Does it even register at a certain point, or like after negative 20, is it over? Are you like, no, negative 40 is very different than negative 20? Like, what is it? What's your thoughts on that as I ask that?
Yeah, the negative 40 is really different than negative 20.
Well, in my experience, like it only gets down to like 8. And then for me, it's in Ohio here, it's like, it's 8 degrees. It might as well be negative 20. It's as cold as it gets. I don't care. What's it matter? But like, it's wind whipping. Like, that's negative 40 actual temperature. What's like, is the wind chill even lower than that?
Oh yeah, it can be, and it's incremental, and it's very incremental. So it's a crazy thing, right? Because the higher you go, those air temperatures feel colder because your body's hypoxic, and of course we're endothermic, so we have to burn energy in order to stay warm, and that's another part of where you're losing a lot of calories. You're spending 1,500 calories, maybe even 2,000 calories every single day just to stay warm. Your body's burning so much energy just to stay warm, and the higher you go, the less oxygen you have. Therefore, it becomes this vicious cycle of less heat that your body's producing. And so even negative 20 at, let's say, 23,000 feet feels colder than negative 20 at sea level, right? And for example, if Ohio were to have some cold lakefront effect coming in from Canada, and all of a sudden for some reason it's negative 20 degrees, well, that negative 20 in Ohio is not quite as cold as the negative 20 at 23,000 feet.
Thanks,
because
Alex.
your body,
thank you.
Yeah, your body's trying to stay warm, but you really do feel it. But the funny thing about Everest, in many ways, depending on where you're on the mountain, especially between Camp 1 and up to Camp 3, you're in this big mountain massive bowl. You're surrounded by the highest mountain in the world, the fourth highest mountain in the world, another mountain that's almost 26,000 feet, and then parts of Everest that protrudes out, which is called the West Ridge and the West Shoulder, because it's such a massive mountain, protrudes out and locks you in to this bowl. It's almost like a bowl here in Colorado if you go skiing in Vail or somewhere in these back bowls that you see videos of where people are going down this wide open terrain. To some degree, it's a lot like that. And what you have is you have the solar radiation effect because you're so high up. So the sun is so intense up in this area called the Western Cone, which is the bowl, and the Lhotse face. And then the snow reflects, that direct sunlight that's hitting it, right, at such high altitude that it's almost like sticking yourself in a microwave. So when the sun is out and there are no clouds, I call it freeze or fry. On Everest, it's really freeze or fry. When the air is still and the sun is out, you're literally shedding layers like crazy because you're just cooking. And the heat index can be 120 degrees. But then within 45 seconds, the clouds can come in because Everest generates its own weather. And then all of a sudden, it drops literally 100 degrees of temperature in a minute or two. And so now you're scrambling to put clothes back on. So it's this constant battle with yourself and constant battle with the elements. And then as you get closer towards, Camp 4 and you get up towards, going out for the summit, that freeze or fry scenario kind of goes away. And now it's just pretty much freeze. And it's just how cold is it, and then you're constantly just regulating your temperature to try to stay warm enough and not to expend too much that you're not having enough left in you to achieve the objective, which is to get to the summit and back.
Wow, 100-degree shift.
Yeah,
that is insanity. And you said in minutes. Is it almost like a hot flash? Like you're like, I have to remove this stuff now. Is that
totally?
Like, wow,
totally.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what do you do in that situation? You stop everything, and we got to change now, or
Yeah. What you do is you layer up. So you have 3 layers on typically. So what you're constantly saying, okay, and if it's a down suit, it's a real pain in the ass because the down suit looks like an astronaut suit. So you unzip the thing, you have to pull it down. You can't take it off. So the best you can do is tie it around your waist like a sweatshirt, and that's as good as it gets. So your legs, you can unzip the zippers there, but you can't actually take the suit off. So you're still going to have that residual overheating to some degree, no matter what.
Then you're sweating, and then you have moisture, and then it gets cold.
Yeah, that sucks. That's really sucks.
Oh,
and that's a bad deal. As you know, if you've done any hiking, the worst thing you can do in the wintertime or snowmobiling or anything like that, the worst thing you can do is sweat and have exposed moisture to the outside air because that instantly will freeze and your body temperature, core temperature will drop pretty fast.
Man, this is insane. Like the more I learn about it, just the more insane it is, and it's crazy that people even attempt to do this at all. So, I should have asked this after I asked the number 1, number 2 question. What does it smell like up there? And in my life, I know a lot of people don't talk about this that often, but smell is so powerful for me, nostalgically, memories, like. It's such a potent sensory that I'm wondering what do you, there's nothing but snow. There's nothing living up there. You're the only thing producing fecal matter and excretion up there. And now if people are carrying it on a bag, I know that's not what you were doing, but like, what do you and your group smell like? Do you smell like sweat and gross? Are you even thinking about that? What's that like? What do you, you smelling food? What, anything at all? Just crisp, clean air, beautiful, perfect?
Yeah, great question. I don't think anyone's asked that question. Yeah, at base camp and at the camps when you're actually around your teammates, at first you start to smell that musk, like, being in a guy's locker room after a football practice or a football game. But then day after day after day after day, I guess it's the same if you lived on a farm. You no longer smell the cow shit. You no longer smell the food. Or if you're constantly feeding your cat food out of a can, you no longer smell that anymore. It's just, you get used to it because everyone stinks around you. right? You're sweating day in, day out, day out. And it's not like I'm going to go take a shower, a nice little sauna day, so everybody just starts to stink. So after a while, you don't even smell anybody. That's the first thing. The second thing is the higher you go, the less you smell also, because that the ability to smell, the sensory ability to smell goes away, because again, your taste receptors, your smell receptors, all these things get inhibited by altitude. So you start to smell less and less. So even if you're eating something at camp too, that you're boiling up some water to put, a backpacker pantry in there, or to have any kind of the potato or something, or noodles that may have been carried up to camp too, you just don't really smell much. The only thing you smell is the amount of spice you put in there. So the more spices, and that's kind of the secret, a little secret hack for people that want to go to Everest. If you can, bring as much powdered spicing as you can, because if what you think is over spicing down here is just enough to give it some flavor, because otherwise everything just tastes like paper. It tastes horrible. You don't feel like eating. You have no appetite. You can hardly smell it. So anything you can do to entice your body to try to put food down, or to smell anything that might be appealing, the better.
Awesome. I would love for you to talk more about the food situation. What's it like from the time, you're drinking homemade whiskey mash with cherry flavor, with a guy that's like a superstar to you that you're getting to meet at the base camp, and it's all downhill from there. So like, what is it? And I would love, like, maybe this is a longer question for you to answer, but what's it like totally up and down? And I would assume there's some differences between on your way up versus on your way down, of maybe the weight, or now maybe your body's reacclimating, so you are starving. And I'll probably have some follow-up questions, even as do you have to be careful about how quickly you're reconsuming calories and doing that? So anything you can talk about the food, and then I have some other more acclimation questions, but I'd love to hear about the food circumstances from base camp all the way up.
Yeah, base camp, since you're there for 2 months, you try to make it as comfortable as possible. And base camp, everything that's taken to base camp is either brought in on the back of a porter, on the back of a yak, or on a helicopter. Right? There are no roads that lead to Everest Base Camp. Like I said, it takes 9 days to trek there, and everything has to go down that trail or by the air, with a helicopter. So for months, base camp's being set up in advance. So, 2 months out before the climbing season starts, people are already starting to head towards base camp, to set up base camp, to find a place, because, the Khumbu Glacier, which is what you sit on top of at base camp, is shifting. It's flowing downhill, right? So everything moves year in, year out. So every year you have to go and find a new spot to set up your base camp, meaning the expedition teams. So they go out months in advance, about 1 to 2 months in advance. They start moving rocks and trying to set up places where they can set up tents. That's the first thing. Then they start the logistics of sending in food in order to support life at base camp for 52 days, right? For that time that it takes to actually climb the mountain, and the amount of time that you're spending at base camp, which is considerable, because if you're not up at camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, or going for the summit from camp 4 on, you're at base camp acclimatizing and getting ready for your next rotation up the mountain. So at base camp, the living is pretty good depending on what team you go with, because they bring all kinds of supplies up there in these barrels, on the back of a yak and stuff. So you have chefs, you have cooks at base camp that their only job is to feed the expedition team, the Sherpa support staff, and so on, that makes that engine go. So no different than an Army chef sitting at a base somewhere that's feeding people every single day, the troops. It's the same kind of a scenario. However, once you leave base camp, now you're talking about packed lunches, dehydrated, meals like you would get at REI, less and less convenience and good stuff the higher you go up the mountain. So camp 1, you will have, basically a sandwich that you would take with you, that you carry with you, and a banana and maybe an apple that you carry with you from base camp up into the mountain. We kind of talk about that in the 2D documentary, the Quest to Everest 2D documentary. And then you're just eating essentially like block shots, power bars, these kind of things that you brought with you from home, right? Everybody kind of has their own little thing that they bring with them. Their hiking hacks, their trekking hacks that they like, their comfort snacks, So I brought, block shots, and I brought some, also some bars, some energy bars with me that I would give out to people as well. that didn't have access to them. But, I had a sponsor that gave me some of them, so I brought those with me. So you're living off of this kind of stuff.
Shameless sponsor shout out. If you don't want to do it, that's okay. But good opportunity.
Yeah. So I can mention the sponsor if we'd like, but
might as well. I mean, give them a plug. Shoot.
Yeah, so I brought Cliff block shots, which are some of my favorite.
All right.
Yeah, I absolutely love Cliff block shots because they're just like these little cubes you would throw in there. And then I brought Honey Stinger bars and waffles. Honey Stinger, it was a Colorado-based company. They gave me some stuff and goo as well, and I gave them to the Sherpas as we're going through the ice fall, as we're moving to Camp 2. I would just randomly find a Sherpa that you could tell, he could use some energy. He had nothing to eat or whatever, or he was in a spot where he had no access to anything. And I just kind of could sense it, and they never had this stuff before. A lot of these guys never had this stuff before, so I would just give out a goo packet to them, or a block shot to them, or a Honey Stinger waffle, and they absolutely loved it. By the time I was, going for the summit, I already gave all my stuff out, and Ryan and my teammates, they loved the stuff, so I gave it to them. But yeah, so these are the things that I took up the mountain on each rotation as we were working our way up the mountain. The only other place that you had any kind of sustenance was at Camp 2, because Camp 2 is kind of an intermediary camp between base camp and the summit. So Camp 2 was that at base of that Lhotse face that we talked about, that 5,000-foot wall of ice. So it's kind of on this rock outcrop. So it's kind of lends itself to be a good place to set up this intermediary camp because you're spending a couple of days there anyway. So we would set up a tent up there, a cooking tent up there. And so we had some, decent food like noodles and stuff, but nothing nearly as good as what we had at base camp. But that was pretty much the last of any kind of sustenance. The rest of the time, you're literally just eating out of a bag, or eating these block shots, or eating these Honey Stinger, waffles and stuff. And on summit night itself, you ate nothing. But I had one sleeve of block shots with me, and that's it, and a couple liters of water, and that's all you have for that long, arduous climb to the summit and back down to Camp 4.
Gosh, man, and like you're forcing yourself to eat most of this time, and
yeah, you're just cognizant. I just tell myself, okay, every hour, every 2 hours, just take one of these block shots. I really don't want one, but that's 100 cheap calories of sugar. That could help. That may help, may not help, but I just told myself to do that. And I was really consistent as best as possible to make sure that I would like almost mathematically calculate, all right, how many block shots should I take with me this time when we're heading up the mountain, where then I would consume X amount of these along the way. How many of the waffles should I have with me? So when we sit down and take a little bit of break of water, I'll eat one of these and give some off to my teammates, and these kind of things. So you kind of calculate these caloric loads that you took with you. And of course, you want to take as little as possible because you don't want to carry a lot of weight, but little things like that can also make the difference on not just, the energy that you might need, but also the spirits. It's crazy how a little thing like that, having a little taste of a salted watermelon cube, can kind of lift the spirit a little bit to kind of keep you going further.
Oh, I bet. I mean, just food in general is so amazing in regular life. I can't imagine what it's like when you're burning a half pound a day. So what was it like? So you're going up, it's brutal. At what point are you coming down and you actually get to eat again? So the thing that gets me about talking to you about this is climbing up is only half of the battle, and it's so insane. Everybody talks climbing Everest, but it's not just about climbing Everest. That's only half of it. You have to go down Everest, and it's not like a helicopter's meeting you up there and like, work's done, great job, Timmy, we're gonna fly you down and get you hot chocolate and soup and a steak. Like, nope. You gotta turn around, go all the way back, and dangerous again, hungry again, still burning calories. At what point does that start to lighten? The energy start to lighten, and you're like, I'm getting back to it. I can eat more. I'm getting some real food. Are you not getting real food all the way back until base camp?
Yeah, you don't get any real food till you get back to base camp. And you're right. More people die on the descent than they do actually on the
I think it's because they'd give up. Their brain, they stop being focused. They won the championship, and now they party their face off for the descent. And
Yep.
See ya.
You lose focus. You're
Yeah.
totally spent. You're hypoxic, so your brain is starving for oxygen, so you're almost half drunk. You feel like you're dizzy all the time. That's the first thing. The second thing is you burn through all your adrenaline to try to get to the summit, because this is a lifelong goal, commitment, everything. And then if you're fortunate enough to make it to the summit, you've expended all your adrenaline, right? Now that's gone. That reserve is gone. So you're hypoxic, you're out of adrenaline, you're tired, because you've been climbing now for 12 hours in the middle of the night to try to make it to the summit. Now you got to get back down to the tent that you left, 12 hours prior. And the other thing is, it's like the analogy I like to use is like climbing a tree. Climbing a really tall tree is all upper body strength going up. You're doing pull-ups. You're just grabbing yourself, hand over feet going up. But going down is all mental focus and balance, because now you've got to place every single foot that you step down. Every little handhold has to be mentally placed, because it's not physical per se in order to get down. It's mental in order to get down. And if you don't place your feet right, you slip out of the tree, you fall out of the tree. Well, the same thing goes on Everest. If you don't plant your foot right, or you forget to clip into the rope and you hit your stupid heel with your spike of your crampon, and then all of a sudden that forces you to fall over down the Lhotse face you slide, or down the summit ridge you slide, or into China you fall, because you're climbing on the actual international border between China
What
and
a
Nepal.
statement. You fall into China. That's a crazy thing that's a crazy sentence to say.
Yeah, so it's all about focus and being able to stay 3 feet in front of you and place every foot with precision, hour after hour after hour after hour, and not making one mistake. And so again, that's why most people die on the descent and not on the ascent when it comes to deaths on Everest. Out of the 345 people that have died up there.
Man, this is just intense, man. Talking to you about this is unlike any conversation I ever have. It's not. I've never spoken to anyone that's climbed Everest before, but every time I talk to you about this, it just opens the door to how little I could ever imagine what it would be like. If you're like, imagine climbing Everest, and my brain goes wild. You could give me a year to think of all the things, and it would just never come close to the stories that you're sharing. What does it feel like in the? Actually, before we move on to that, I'm going to ask you one more. Hold on one second. Sorry. You talk about the glacier moving, and how much is it moving every year?
It moves between 3 to 6 feet a day.
A day. So, is this changing so rapidly that eventually this glacier will be far enough down the mountain that something else has to happen, or maybe base camp fundamentally changes? Is there like I'm wondering if there's a clock that's like, this glacier's moving by this much, by this year, this thing won't even be the way it was anymore, and we have to rethink how this works, or rethink where base camp works? Or is it just a continual shift as condensation and things come down the mountain?
Yeah, so what happens is, the snowfall up higher, up on Lhotse and on the flanks of Everest that feeds the glacier every year, is what keeps that ice flow lower down the valley still, essentially populated. So all that snowfall that Everest is seeing now, right now the monsoons are hitting Everest, or about to hit like in a day or two. Well, that is a tremendous amount of snowfall that's going to hit on Everest and Lhotse and so on. And what that does throughout the year until next year, this time when people go to climb the mountain, it has now fed that glacier with more snow and ice, right? So it kind of restocks it. Now, the thing is, every year, the amount of snowfall that Everest receives and Lhotse, the adjacent mountain where the actual glacier starts from, that changes. So if you had, let's say, 10 bad years of snow or 10 years of no snow for whatever reason, yeah, that would totally change the topography of the glacier down below it. The other thing is the glacier down below that runs all the way down into the valley, those glaciers, the actual edge of the glacier where the moraine is, the terminal point of that glacier, wherever it ends in the Khumbu Valley, that changes in cycles in the course of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years. It's been shifting where they've receded and then they've grown, and they've receded and they've grown, and that depends on, what's the actual temperature on an annual basis in the region, what's the snowfall like, and so on. So that's variable from, not so much year in, year out, but over the course of blocks of years. I'd say 20
Sure.
years, 50 years, 100 years,
Yeah.
1,000 years, and so on. And so it's hard to say, but if, let's say if there were 20 years of no snow on Everest, and the peak were to turn essentially, to the most part, the lower part of the peak and where the Khumbu Icefall and the Khumbu Glacier starts, I mean, what would happen is that valley where Camp 1 sits and Camp 2 sits would now become not just a big snow field, it would be almost like a big indented crevasse field where it would just be, these remnants of massive amounts of blocks of ice and snow with massive crevasses in between them up to the base of the
like empty riverbeds, basically.
Yeah, essentially, exactly what it would be like. And then the actual ice fall itself would just be a huge rock boulder field. Because all that ice has pushed down rocks over the millennium underneath it, right? So what's churned out at the bottom of the glacier is a bunch of rocks that have been pushed downhill. And so it would be a huge field of rocks and dirt instead of big blocks of ice, and crevasses that go over those blocks of rocks and dirt currently.
So as you bring that up, the thought of people talking about global warming comes to mind. Is that something Sherpas talk about, or people that are on Everest or have been for decades? Is that something they discuss, or does it seem pretty consistent over longer periods of time that Everest has remained Everest as one would remember it?
Yeah, yes and no. Right now we're in a cycle where the amount of snowfall is probably less than it was, let's say, in 1953 when it was first climbed. However, that, again, you can't take in year over year. You can't just say, oh, well, this year versus that year, therefore it means this. You've got to take it, like you said, in those blocks of 25, 50-year increments, to really analyze that. But if you look at older pictures of Everest, you see that the surrounding peaks and lower down on the mountain, you see that there has been more snow. So when we talk about climate change, let's say, for example, as this, buzzword or buzz phrase over the last 10 years or maybe 20 years, well, really, that's kind of, don't know, because if you look back 50 or 75 years, or you go back to 1924, 22, 23, and 24, when it was first attempted to be climbed, by a guy named George Mallory. He was the first person to try to step foot on it. Those pictures back then, 100 years ago, look completely different. So you're looking at something now, we're putting a modern construct onto something that we didn't really think about 100 years ago. And so therefore, when does this whole shift in weather patterns start, right?
Yeah. And we haven't documented it as well. Like there's no pictures, there's no video,
that's right. Sure. That's right. No measurements and so on. But you can see anecdotally that in 1924 and 1953, that there was more snow up in Everest and, on the north side of Everest as well, where Mallory was in the 1920s. So, so this is not something that has started, for example, in 20 years or 15 or 10 years since we started talking about climate change. This is something that, again, it could be in a cycle that could be 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. Who's to say? But what you do know is that as you start to document this stuff, if we're still around in 200 years, we'd have a lot more data to know whether or not now is it getting colder again? Is there more snow, more moisture? Because it's not really based off localized weather. It's based off of global trade winds.
Well, more than that, even like solar sun patterns.
Yeah, that's right.
Magnetic.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
exactly.
Depends on how deep you want to go. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's right. You can dig really deep. Yeah, exactly.
We're going to 88,000 year cycles here, Alex. Is that how? I mean, that's if we're going to go all the way. So, thank you for answering that, Alex. I love talking to you so much. You are just you are incredible. You're inspirational, and your energy is amazing. It's great to be connected with you, and I appreciate your time very much. Thank you for giving us more of your time today, King. I think these podcasts will inspire many people over the years, and it's great to have them recorded and have you. Thank you for being here today. Anybody's paying attention, listening in right now, check out the Quest. They're here in the space. Follow Alex Harz. Go to Rad TV. You can find the Quest series on Rad and watch in VR. And check out Alex's links in his bio here to everything that he's doing. He's got 2D stuff. He's got a whole website. You can watch his documentaries everywhere. He is really an amazing creator, producer, and has been sharing this story consistently for the last couple years and has a lot more planned. And we really look forward to what's next from him. Alex, what are the Sherpas like? I'm wondering, who are these psychopaths? And I mean that with all love. But like, who is volunteering to just go up and down Everest over and over again like a human elevator and take, I hate to have this energy, but it's true. It's like you often, especially coming from the Western world, like you're taking a bunch of rich Western white men up a mountain that have lived cushy lives and they're wealthy beyond imagination for most of the world. And they've had every comfort and they can afford all the comforts. They're hiring these Sherpas that are so ingrained in this world and this lifestyle and these treacherous conditions. How well paid are these people? Is this their passion? Did they fall in? Are they locals that fell into this and this is the thing that young men are thinking, or young women? I'd love to know, even is it men and women equally, or is it predominantly males? Is there a predominant age group here? Anything you could shed light on as far as like who these people are, why in the world are they doing this? And like, is the pay really worth it? Or are they just happy to be the champions taking people up?
Well, great question. A lot to unpack here. Okay. So maybe, the good answer, not to really plug the film, the 2D 97-minute
King,
documentary.
we're here to plug. That's what we're doing. The Quest series, the Quest series.
All those questions you just asked, you get a really good visual and audio account of it in the new 97-minute The Quest Everest 2D documentary. And if
awesome.
you go to
where's that streaming? Yeah, tell us.
So it's on Amazon, Apple TV, and so on. So if you go to thequesteverest.com, you'll see a links on where you can watch it. So whatever platform you prefer to digest that content on, you can. But just go to thequesteverest.com and watch the 97-minute The Quest Everest documentary. And we really dig deep into this question that you just asked me, like no other documentary has prior. But to now answer the question, there's a lot of things. First of all, historically, a lot of people think, and maybe this is a misnomer that's due to Mount Everest. A lot of people think Sherpa means high altitude worker, porter, climber, guide, and it's not. It's actually an ethnic group, an ethnic people, no different than, let's say, the Edinburgh. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, it actually is an ethnic group that came over from the Kham region of Tibet, right, in eastern Tibet about 650 years ago. They left persecution in Tibet, went up and over the mountain passes and ended up in the Khumbu Valley, and they were looking for a safe place to worship and to basically live their lives, and they ended up in the Khumbu Valley. That's why they're there.
Holy cow, that is incredible. Oh, this could be its whole own document. This is amazing. Keep going. Thank you for sharing.
Yep. So they're actually an ethnic group, no different than, let's say, the Cherokee Indians or the Eskimos or the Bedouin people of Saudi Arabia and so on. They're actually an ethnic group that moved from Tibet or China into Nepal, into the Khumbu Valley. But over living there, over the course of about 650 years, each generation has gotten a little bit of an altitude advantage. So over the course of those 650 years, what's happened is genetically, they have altered to about a 10% advantage in being able to deal with high altitude. Now, that doesn't sound a lot, but like a lot.
Talking, you said a strand of hair between life and death for the people that have done it, then this is a lot.
And it is a lot. And specifically, and again, now we're getting into medical stuff. That's really interesting because a lot of people don't talk about this. What the Sherpa people have, generally speaking, if we're stereotyping, I mean, all of them can get sick. And we had one of our Sherpas had to get a helicopter evacuated back to Kathmandu with altitude sickness. So they're also prone and, to getting sick and not being able to make it to the summit and all that stuff. They're humans. At the end of the day, they're not a different, gene line of Australopithecus or something. But over the course of that 650 years of living in the Khumbu Valley, that 10% advantage, what specifically means to them working at this altitude is that their mitochondria, which is, essentially our little blast furnaces, our energy portions of our cells that gives us energy, has become more efficient in burning oxygen. So that gives them an advantage in being able to have stamina and to go longer at these altitudes. That's the first thing. The second thing is their capillaries and their veins, especially in the extremities, in their hands and feet, in their legs and so on, are more open. So they're able to transport more volume of blood throughout their system and out to the extremities, which allows their muscles to fire more efficiently and to be more efficient, and also allows them and protects them better against, for example, frostbite and these kind of hypoxic conditions that arise in your extremities. So those two things specifically give them about a 10% advantage at altitude over the course of living at that altitude for about 650 years.
Which is basically a 100% advantage when you talk about the margins. 10% is insanity.
That's right. Exactly. And now to the next part, to the part of how they became into, being, for example, the figurehead of high altitude mountaineering in Nepal. Yes, because they ended up in the Khumbu Valley. Mount Everest is at the end of the Khumbu Valley. So therefore, the people that live at the base of Mount Everest and the communities near Mount Everest, they're the ones that are obviously most suited to be engaged in becoming a porter, to becoming a guide, to becoming a high altitude worker, or as we know it as a Sherpa. But again, that's a wrong perception. But that's, they don't mind that, but that most people don't understand that that's not what it actually means. So they were best suited for it ever since 1953 when Everest was first climbed. And then what happened as the economy developed for trekking in the Khumbu Valley because of how beautiful it is and trying to get to Everest Base Camp, and then you got a few idiots like me that actually want to try to get to the top of the mountain. As that whole economy developed, the Sherpas were the people that were most engaged with the Western operators to develop this backbone of high altitude Himalayan climbing. Again, we talk about this in the Quest Everest, but they were the most suited for it, and their communities were the most suited to support that industry, right? Now, from a financial perspective, Nepal is the 165th poorest country in the world out of the 196 countries or the 200 countries, depending on what baseline you go off of constitutes a country. But of the 196 countries, that we recognize, they are the 165th poorest country in the world. Wow. So the average median income in Nepal is about $750 to $1,200 a year.
Wow.
A year.
Wow.
Okay. So what a Sherpa will get paid in 2 months' time to climb Mount Everest, or to be a porter to carry supplies to Everest, or to be a cook that works.
That's $3.30 a day at $1,200 a year.
That's it. They could make anywhere between $5,000 and $45,000 in 2 months' time. So they're basically getting like an NBA salary. So in the course of 2 months, they can make 3 to 20, 30 years of income in 2 months. So for them, it's not only a huge financial incentive to be engaged in the Everest climbing community or
this
the
makes
trekking.
them rich. They live a rich life if they can do it one time successfully, and if they can do it multiple times, then their family's set up for success forever.
Exactly. If they then stay on that same baseline of expenditure, right? As long as they don't go out and start buying iPhones and doing all this other stupid things that the Western people do. Sure. But if they just stay at that same baseline of what their normal median income is, yes, they are absolutely absolutely covering multiple years of income in a matter of 2 months. The other thing about it is that these Sherpa people are highly respected, not just by us Westerners that dote over their ability to work at this high altitude, but also by their own people themselves. So they are like the rock stars. They are like the NBA players of the Khumbu Valley. It's a highly respected position to be a Sherpa and working on Mount Everest. And it's not like everybody gets that opportunity. You have to kind of work your way up that ladder. You have to kind of prove yourself, because these operators, be it a Nepali company that hires the Sherpa or a Western company or someone from South America, Europe, or Japan or whatever that hires these Sherpas for their expeditions, they have to be vetted to a large degree. Are they capable of doing this kind of work, right? Because now you're putting not only the risk of the climbers that are coming over from XYZ country to climb that mountain, that these Sherpas are competent, capable of being able to actually make it to the summit of Everest, but to also be safe enough in the procedure that they're not putting other Sherpas or the climbers that are with them in danger. So there's a whole process, a pecking order of how these Sherpas get their positions and how often they get to go back to Everest, and then how they become stalwarts on working on the mountain and making that kind of money year in, year out.
Incredible. I'm so glad you have that to share with us. That's I had no idea that they were an ethnic group. That blows my mind. I feel ashamed and like embarrassed by that, honestly.
Well, you're not the only one, and at least now and it's one of those things that now if you can spread the word, or hopefully these two films, the Quest Everest VR,
Absolutely.
and the Quest Everest 2D documentary can shed light to that as well. So again, as you know, by watching them, it's not so much about climbing Everest as it is about the whole backstory of Everest and what it's like, and then the people that we talk to and engage with, and the beauty and the scenery of the valley, and all that other kind of stuff. So you get a little bit more of a historical, contextual understanding of what Mount Everest is all about and what it means to the Sherpa people, to the people of Nepal, to the country's identity. Because again, it is a national pride for the Nepali people, because Mount Everest is the highest place on earth, and people that know nothing about Nepal and can't even put their finger on a world map of where Nepal is, they know Mount Everest.
Right. Coro, I see you have requested the last 15 minutes. We usually do a Q&A session for audience members. So please, you can stay requested, and I will bring you up about 15 minutes to ask your questions. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being engaged. Appreciate it. I have like 100 questions on Sherpas, but we're not going to do it. We're just going to keep going. Did you guys have any fights or disagreements on the mountain, or any moments of like turmoil that were
No,
not
we had none.
Okay, awesome.
Our team was a very tight team, and it's a good question, because I told my buddy who was the expedition leader, Ryan. I said, Ryan, here's the thing. I trust your decision making. And Tashi, who was the Sirdar, which is a term for head Sherpa guide, meaning the guy that runs the team of Sherpas that work on the mountain. His name is a Sirdar, and Tashi was our Sirdar.
How do you spell that?
Sirdar, Sirdar.
Thank you.
Yep. And so I said to Tashi, and I said to Ryan, I said, whatever decisions you make with regards to the climbing elements of us going up and down this mountain, and especially for the summit push, because once you make that decision, you're pot committed and you hope you got it right. And you go, almost blindly into the unknown and hope that you make it.
With your whole life.
That's right. You're pot committed. And I told Ryan and I told Tashi, I said, whatever decisions you make, I will follow them, and I will follow you implicitly. If you decide to jump off a ladder in the Khumbu Icefall, I will follow you like a lemon. If you decide to jump off the Kangshung face into China, I will follow you, because I trust you 100%. Because I was there also focused on the filming, so I couldn't worry about those things as much anyway. So I had to put my trust not only into the mountain, but into Tashi and Ryan and my teammates, right? So we didn't have any of that, but what we did come up with was our initial summit date was going to be May 18th. But because these are weather projections, you get these projections not as local weather, like, oh, you're sitting in New York or sitting in Ohio, and you say, oh, today it's going to be 65 and sunny, and then by 4 o'clock you're going to have some afternoon showers. No, it doesn't work that way. Everest, A, because it generates its own weather, throws that into a wrench, and B, it's so high up that literally the jet stream that we know that flies over the United States, well, it flies around the whole world, and it happens to fly over Mount Everest most of the year. And the only reason why you can get to the summit of Everest this time of the year is because for a few short moments, it could be a couple of days, it could be a week, every year it changes. It's dependent on the jet stream. When the jet stream's over the summit of Everest, like it is most of the year, the wind speed could be over 100 miles an hour plus. You're not going up there. It's not happening no matter what. But in May, at some point in May, starting as early as sometimes about the 7th, 8th, or 9th, going as late as today, be about as last day that you would have a potential opportunity to make it up there, because the actual climbing season shuts down June 1st. Hell or high water, you got to be off the mountain because your permit expires on June 1st, and you have no more logistical support by then. So then you'd be, in a real difficult situation getting off the mountain without the ladders to get through the ice fall and so on. All that stuff is pulled off the mountain every year. So you have the jet stream that wobbles over the summit of Everest. And what happens is you have the monsoon season that starts in India and in the Bay of Bengal will start to push up into India. That causes the monsoon rains that are now starting in Thailand and in Southeast Asia and so on. That pushes up into the Himalayas, and that causes the jet stream to move off the summit of Everest just for a brief enough time that if you time it right, you can maybe make it to the summit. So our initial projection, we got our projections from a weather guy in Belgium, so thousands of miles away, nowhere close to Nepal, because he's a really strong expert in knowing global trade winds, weather patterns, high pressure systems, so on, moon cycles, and all these different things, that he said, okay, we thought originally May 18th was the day we should try to go for the summit. So when you try to go for the summit, you have to leave 5 days prior on your last attempt, and then you try to calculate to be there at that time. Well, then when we were starting to get closer and closer to our departure date of the 14th, we all of a sudden realized, whoa, 18 started to look bad. Let's push it to the 21st. So the only dissension wasn't amongst us on, oh, yeah, the way this guy is acting or how he's climbing or what kind of dangerous position, this guy's putting us in versus this guy. It was more about, the conflict between the weather reports that we were getting from Belgium and whether or not they were going to be reliable enough to make, a very important decision on when we were going to head for the summit. So it wasn't any conflict within the team. It was more about battling projections on whether or not we go with the 18th or go with the 21st that we ultimately went with.
So, my king, what day did you actually summit?
The May 21st. And
May 21st. How long has it been? How many years?
It's been a minute now, and the thing is, however, what's a really cool question, Cam, is because it's now become like an anniversary.
That's what I was just going to say. Is happy anniversary. It's so amazing. I'm glad to have you at this time. Happy anniversary.
And I've started this little routine that I do every year. If I'm in Colorado on the 21st of May, I will go to this restaurant in Golden, Colorado called the Sherpa House. And it's owned by 100% owned by Sherpas, and it's Nepali and Indian food. And the people that own that restaurant are all from the Khumbu Valley. And they're all from these villages that I visited within my climb of Mount Everest and the filming of the Quest and the Quest Everest VR.
Wow.
That so these are people that are, near and dear to me, from an arm's length, that I will give them a respect every May 21st to dine at their place and maybe share some stories with these amazing people that have ended up in Golden, Colorado and started this restaurant called the Sherpa House.
Amazing. You're just fantastic to talk to. You got to just keep making content, King. Keep going. This is incredible. And you have such a bright future ahead with this stuff here. I'm telling you, you are the person that's supposed to be telling this, no doubt. That's why God sent you to the top of Everest, no doubt.
Well, I'm humbly honored, buddy. And again, like I said, I'm glad that you're interested in this stuff. And if I can share it with anybody, and if it helps, either provide some information, shed some light, on Nepal or Mount Everest, or even maybe sets them on a path to conquer their own personal Everest, then that's all I can ask for. And like I said, I'm humbly honored to be able to share that information and this content that we have available for the world to see.
So I got a couple more, and then we're going to get to some questions here. When did you feel closest to death on your climb? Was there any particular moment? And I'm guessing when I say that, you're probably like, bam, soon as I say it, you got the answer, or there wasn't one.
There was a couple situations where I was like, "Oh God, if I would have missed that clip, or if I had missed my foot placement there, that would have been a bad day for me." Yeah, a couple times. One time was actually coming back down off the summit. Another time was going up towards the summit. I was passing a Sherpa. These are very interesting situations that you can't plan for. They just kind of arise, but. The first one was a ladder situation in the ice fall. We got back to the ice to base camp after one of our rotations, and one of my teammates is a Brazilian guy, and he was a pretty well-known guy because not many people from Brazil have climbed Everest, and so there was a Brazilian news outlet that was following him along and everything, and so he was watching this live stream reporting back in Brazil of his expedition, our expedition basically, and so he comes up to me while we're at base camp and he says, "Alex, I got to show you this video." And I said, "All right, Gilberto, what do you got?" And he shows me this video of these two Sherpas walking across the ladder in the Khumbu Icefall. And all of a sudden, they just disappeared. The ladder collapsed and they fell into a crevasse. And I looked at him. I said, "Gilberto, do you know we crossed that ladder about 6 hours ago? And did you know that you and I each weighed more than both of those guys combined? And why is it that we didn't fall in? Why did the ladder not collapse when we were standing on it, but it collapsed when those two Sherpas were on it?" And so it was that whole Russian roulette thing. We were just in the right place at the right time. And he knew then, you know what, I might have cheated one here if I would have been 6 hours later, or if just for some random reason that ladder decided to give out when we were there 6 hours prior. That was one situation where you kind of just go, take a deep breath. Yeah. Another one was we got hit by an avalanche going through the ice fall. Matter of fact, it was the first time we were heading to Camp 1. We got hit by an avalanche, and an avalanche was coming down the west shoulder of Everest. And our expedition leader, who was out in front of us, Ryan, he just turned around. He said, "Just duck and clip." And that kind of is like this term that you give that you take your carabiner and you clip into the rope and you duck, and you just kind of take what comes to you. Now, realistically, what does it actually do? If the avalanche would have had a lot of force, all it does is dismember you, and then just maybe your torso still clipped to the rope.
Yeah, there's rocks and everything, boulders.
Yeah,
right?
it's not going to save you. All it does is keep your body from being dislodged, possibly from the rope.
Your core. It was you're not your body, your core.
Yeah, your core. Yeah, where your harness is attached. And so everybody's ducking and covering, and I'm doing that stupid war reporter thing like we were talking about earlier. I'm trying to reach for the camera because I'm like, I got to film this versus I got to protect myself. And again, it was just this subconscious response to reach for the camera to get this on camera, while everyone else is ducking like an old Soviet Union Cold War situation, getting underneath your desk if a nuclear bomb comes, as if that's going to help you, right? Same thing, as if that's going to help you from this avalanche. Luckily, the tail end of that avalanche only hit us, not the whole mass of it. So we only got sprayed by it. And I was able to get a little bit of that. And you see it again in that 97-minute documentary, The Quest Everest. And the guy in front of me, which was that Brazilian teammate I mentioned, he turns around into the camera and he is panting. Just panting out of fear. And he's like, panting. And then Ryan, of course, being our expedition leader and trying to keep everybody calm and focused, he said, "Yep, that's why you try to get through this section as fast as possible." And then we just got up and kept going.
Yeah, keep going. No time to talk. Let's go.
Yeah, and then I had another situation high at about 27,300 feet below the balcony, which is an iconic area on Everest. There was a Sherpa coming down by himself, and I can tell something was wrong with him, and I'm all by myself at this point. I was taking in just the most beautiful sunrise I've ever seen in my life, and he happens to be there on the steep slope before we got to this point where you actually then hit the international border between Nepal and China, or Nepal and Tibet, the ridge line that takes you up to the summit. And so he was trying to switch out an oxygen bottle, and he asked me, he goes, "Hey, can you help me switch out this oxygen bottle?" And I realized where we were that this was a real bad place to try to switch out an oxygen bottle. We're at a very steep slope, and of course you're asking to drop this thing, and if you drop that oxygen bottle, it's like a missile heading down the face below you, and anything that's in its way is going to get taken out. So I said to him, "No, do not try to switch out this oxygen bottle." And I pointed back down behind me, and I could see the rest of my team that was behind me about 500-600 feet below me. I said, "You see that guy in the blue suit? go to him and he'll help you switch out that oxygen bottle, because he was at this little plateau area where you could stop and actually do something like that, where you're not on this steep slope of ice. And he then fumbled the bottle and it dropped. And then I saw the bottle just falling in front of us, and it was like slow motion, like watching a bullet, like in Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger or something coming at you. And I could see this oxygen bottle just start picking up steam, and it's bouncing. It's going bing, 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 like a super ball bouncing off the ice. And it's getting closer and closer towards our teammates. And my teammates don't see it coming. I'm thinking, oh no. If it hits one of my teammates, it's going to kill them instantly. No question about it. And then luckily, at the second to last bounce of this oxygen bottle, it hit a rock or something, or a piece of ice that made it skip to the left, and it flew off the Kangchung face down into China, never to be seen again. And I'm like, my heart is just pounding even more than it was pounding because of the altitude and the physical exertion. And then I turned around, I looked at that Sherpa, and I looked him right in the eye, and I said, look, this is why we don't try to switch the oxygen bottle here. Go down to where I said, please, and Tashi down there will help you switch out that oxygen bottle. And so I had a couple more of those kind of situations on anchor points and trying to help somebody get down and set up a rappel and these kind of things, things that you weren't expecting when I was setting out for this climb. But it's those little finite moments that the decision has to be right, or the luck has to be right. Otherwise, things could have turned out bad.
I'm glad that you brought up sound right there, because that's one of my last questions. I have this question and one more. So did things sound different up there?
Yeah, they did, because your ears, when you're dizzy, or you have that feeling when you get out of bed too fast sometimes in the morning, and you just kind of have almost this blacked out, foggy, daisy view in front of you, and then your ears almost have this like muted, sometimes ringing sound in them. Yeah, at times you would have that because of the pressure of how hard you're breathing and how hypoxic you are and how hard you're working, that sometimes you would have this like you're in a fishbowl audio feeling in your head, and sometimes your ears would even ring. Other times when you stood still and you could hear your heart beating in your head because the blood is trying to work so hard to pump to the brain. And then when you weren't overexerting, you had the stillest sound of anything you can imagine, when there was no wind blowing.
No animals, no wind.
There's no animals, no chirping of birds, nothing.
I mean, even the atmosphere is lighter, so the sound would be lessened.
It was like almost deafening quiet at times.
Wow.
Where you can hear yourself think.
That's incredible. Last question, and again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm wondering how long it took you to physically and mentally recover. You're down, forget base station. How long from finishing, and I don't know how long you stay at base once you get down there. You stay an extra day or two, and then when did you feel yourself again? When were you back to your weight? When were you back to Alex that you knew? I know that's never the case after climbing Everest, but like physically and mentally, when did you put the pieces all back together of, I did this thing and now that's behind me?
Well, physically, to this day, I'm never back to the same when I left. And the reason being but immediately, it took me a couple weeks, because by the time I got back to Kathmandu, we spent the day that we got back to base camp. Then that night we had a celebration. The next day you're packing up all your gear, then you're getting ready to take a helicopter flight down valley, because I wanted to film that. And again, you see that in both of the films, the Quest Everest documentary and the Quest Everest VR virtual reality documentary. You see that helicopter flight back down to Kathmandu. By the time I had Kumbu cough, I got this thing called the Kumbu cough, and a lot of climbers do, and it's this excessive coughing that you have. You can't control it. It's an uncontrollable cough, and it's because of all the dry air from weeks and weeks of panting down this dry air, that it actually is like little pieces of fiberglass or razor blades in your lungs, and it actually pops your alveolar sacs in your lungs, and it causes you to bleed and causes you to cough. And they call it the Kumbu cough. And I could not stop coughing to the point that some people get it so violently that they actually break their own ribs, because they cough so hard that the diaphragm breaks their ribs. Gosh. And so I had this Kumbu cough that came on by the time I got back down to base camp after summiting, and that lasted for weeks. I was was in Malaysia after I left Nepal, and then I went to the Philippines and to Japan. And not till after I got on a plane, weeks and weeks later, basically a month later, to fly back to the United States, did that Kumu cough finally subside. So it was this obnoxious, nonstop cough that would keep you up at night and so on. So that was the first thing. The other thing was I had permanent nerve damage in all 10 of my toes. All 10 of my toenails fell off within a couple of days after getting back down to base camp. They looked like I just hit them with a ball-peen hammer repetitively, hour after hour. They were just black and disgusting, and the nails came off. And then, like I said to you earlier, I lost 27 pounds of muscle mass. So the nerve damage in the toes, that's still there, but there's a positive to it. I can kick a wall. I don't really feel it, so I don't stub my toe that much anymore, so that's nice. The Kumu cough is gone, so that's not a problem. The 27 pounds of muscle mass I lost, I still to this day haven't gotten it back, because if I've got some of it back, but not all of it back, because you know how hard it is being an athlete.
Yeah.
To gain 27 pounds of muscle is extremely hard. To gain 27 pounds of fat is extremely easy. So if I would have lost 27 pounds of fat, that would have been no problem. But no, I came back, extremely lean. Like I said before, like I escaped a concentration camp. And to this day, I still haven't gotten that same amount of muscle mass back. I've gotten some of it back, but not to before I left Everest. So, it sticks with you to a large degree for the rest of your life. But again, considering that I came down with 63 hours of content, I'm one of the few people that have, humbly honored to be able to climb the mountain, and again, it was 3 feet from my heart that, I'm still living, so I can't complain.
My king. Coro, I'm going to invite you up. I just sent you an invite if you would like to ask a question. King Alex, my pleasure hosting you, and love to have you back. We got to make this at least yearly. Like yearly, you got to come back.
Yeah, and, I'll do that.
Any other time you have something to promote, we'd love to have you. Go ahead, Coro. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being here today.
Wow, thanks, guys. What can I say? All I can say is short. Yeah, it's with a little bit of German, maybe. It's Digga. This is one of the amazing stories I heard the last years. It's so nice to hear what you feel when you climb the hill. It's so nice, and all I can say is I hope you find some videos or some takes, and maybe I can listen. It's really nice. It's one of my points. Yeah, it's one of the top. Thank you guys.
Oh, you're very welcome. And just check the top post. It's pinned here on the Jumbotron, and you can see Alex. Follow Alex Harz here and hit that link. It is thequesteverest.com. Thequesteverest, all spelled out.com. I'll lead you everywhere. If you want to watch the 360 documentary, it's on Rad TV, and the 2D is on Amazon and elsewhere, Apple TV and a couple other places. Alex is a tremendous producer and just a great storyteller. Incredible guest. Coro, anything else from you? Thank you for asking. You have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, first thing I'll say to Coro, since he's German, I can speak some German. So vielen Dank, Coro. Das war sehr nett von dir. Und ja, du kannst beide die Filme auf die Web, du kannst das aussuchen und kannst das VR sehen an Rad TV, und du kannst das normales Film an Amazon und Apple TV auch sehen. So vielen Dank, Coro. Und ja, ich kann dir nicht mehr sagen als alle die Dank, dass ich kann in deinen Weg werfen, ja.
Wow.
Basically, I thank Coro. Thank you so much.
Incredible. Alex, you are awesome. Alex, what do you have coming up? Coro, go ahead. You came off mute. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, guys. But the thing is, I can listen you, yeah, and it's a fantastic story. And I watch at the same time some videos from you guys, or look at the picture, and it's so immense, yeah. It's not normal that when I meet this art of guys. So I mean, Alex, yeah, it's impossible for me to walk this way. but I can maybe make it better to walk this way for other guys who will walk this way. And that's you have said it's the guys, the really special guys live at the Himalaya or at the Rocky Mountains. These are the specialists, and when you connect with these guys, then you can climb the mountain. So that's all what I say.
Yeah, vielen Dank, Carl. Thank you so much, Carl. And I greatly appreciate those kind words. And it means an awful lot to me, not so much because it is, is directly being something that's complimenting me, but more about, like you said, it's something that I have now the fortune and opportunity to help spread to other people wherever they may be.
I love that your energy, the first time we spoke, it was one of the first things you said was talking about conquering your Everest, whatever it may be. And I think about that regularly. And you mention it all the time. You mention it. It's kind of just become something you say, is conquering your Everest. And I think there's so much power in that, of whatever mountain it is you're climbing. It's always nice to look at the top of the mountain, but you can't look there for long. You've got to look back down at the next step and your step for the day. And that one step, the next step is the important step. The next brick is the important brick, not the 1,000th brick down the road that you can't even see and you're not touching right now. And talking to you, Alex, really puts it into perspective. And somebody that put their life on the line for their dream and what they wanted to achieve is really special. You talk about these athletes, and you said they are the NBA players over there, the people that actually get to guide you up. I don't even want to use the word Sherpa now. So what was the other word? Sirdar,
yeah. The Sirdar. Yeah.
So like the Sirdar taking you up the mountain, they're the NBA player. And that to me is, it's a really unique and special thing to be called the Sirdar. And that now that I have that term instead of a Sherpa, I will try to use that term Sirdar. And I appreciate you educating me on that. And I feel like a door was open for me of like just negligence, I'm just an idiot. We're all like such in our little bubbles, and we're so tapped into what we're tapped into, and learning about other cultures, like just learning that a Sherpa is an ethnic group of people. I've used that word so freely, and I didn't even know what I was saying, and that's how often are we all doing that. And Alex, thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for the work you've put in. Thank you for showing up. Happy anniversary. And don't kick any walls. Not that you would know anyway, or stub your toe or anything. Alex, what would you like to plug today? Anything you want to share? Where can people follow you? Where can people connect with you? Anything you got coming up that you would like to plug?
Yeah, like we talked about, if you want to watch the 2D 97-minute documentary, you can go to thequesteverest.com and look at the links there. If you want to watch the 26-minute virtual reality film, which is the only first-person virtual reality ascent of Mount Everest, you're actually climbing with me all the way to the summit over the course of 26 minutes. You can watch that here on Rad TV. So definitely check that out. You can watch it in your headset. You can watch it on your computer, so you can watch it in different various ways. So it's very nice if you want to get the closest possible experience of what it's like to climb Everest without being dumb enough to get off the couch and trying it yourself. So do that. If you want to follow along me, that's great. You can find me on Alex Harz on all the social media platforms. Luckily that last name of mine is a German last name named after the mountains that run right down the center of Germany, called the Harzgebirge, as they would say over there.
Is your family like mountain climbers?
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's just it
the region based or something?
Yeah, it's like kind of like the Appalachians, like, the rolling hills that run right down the middle of Germany, called the Harz Mountains. And that's, somewhere in the past my family is from. And that's why I have that last name. Well, that also gives me the ability to get Alex Harz for all my social media handles. So I guess that's kind of nice. So you can follow that you can go to Facebook, you can go to Instagram, and you can grab that. But
where are you most active socially?
I would say, is on Facebook and Instagram. And same thing goes with the Quest series. If you go to the Quest series, you go to Instagram, the Quest series is there. You go to Facebook, the Quest series page is there. Also Twitter's the same, or X. But we haven't really started engaging it on this platform until recently. So we're going to start ramping that up because it is a great platform. But traditionally, if you want to see more of the pictures and some of the adventures either that I'm doing or have been doing and what's next, the quickest way to digest that would be through Facebook or Instagram, and either go to Alex Harz or go to the Quest series. Again, the Quest series on Instagram or Facebook, and you'll get a lot of pictures there. So that's kind of a neat way to see it. And our next documentary is slated to be in Africa, so we're going to be going there hopefully very soon. Might be this year, actually, in a couple months, or the first part of next year. You have to deal with that whole monsoon thing that we talked about on Everest. It also is applicable to the Eastern Africa, so they have 2 rainy seasons there where we're going. So we have to kind of work our way around that. But it looks like the Quest VR film or the Quest 2D film will be taking place in Africa. So once you're done watching the Quest Everest or the Quest Everest VR, maybe get ready for the next one.
Amen. King Alex, thank you for your time. And again, happy anniversary. You are an awesome, inspirational human being. And I look forward to meeting you and shaking your hand one day in the near future and buying you a drink or a coffee or a water, whatever you prefer.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, Cam, and I look forward to that day, and maybe I will buy you the lunch, dinner, coffee, or brew, whatever you want.
I owe it to you, no doubt, no doubt. For your time here and the energy you've given us, I look forward to it very much. And if you travel to Ohio, we're going to New York in June. If you're going to be anywhere around there, I'd love to link with you. And if you ever coming this way, don't hesitate to reach out. Everybody go follow Alex. Check out thequesteverest.com. Again, thequesteverest.com. Thank you all for tuning in today. Happy Friday. Alex, any last words before we end it?
Well, I just want to say thank you all for taking your time to listen to us. Thank you, Cam, for asking amazing questions and to be, genuinely interested in the topic. And thank you all for taking the time, if you do, to watch these films, because that was one of the main reasons I did this, was to be able to share it with the rest of the world. So hopefully you don't have to do what I did or attempt to try to do what I did, and be able to share some of this stuff with the people that mean the most. And that's you guys out there that are listening, watching, and following along. So thank you so much.
Amen. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening. King Alex, God bless you, and we'll talk again soon, my king. Thank you for your time today. Check out radtv.com. My name is Cameron. If anybody's interested in monetizing or distributing your content, you can get it on 6 billion devices today without talking to anyone. Our DMs are open. You can launch live TV channels. You can put up your content. You can sell content directly. You can put your content behind our premium paywall. There are a ton of ways to get paid, and we pay creators 33% more than YouTube pays, and we do it day one. Not when you get 1,000 subs, not when you have 3,000 watch hours, day one. So if you want to get started, go ahead and get started at radtv.com or shoot me a message in DMs. I'll be happy to answer your questions. King Alex, thank you, sir. We will be featuring the Quest Everest VR in the #1 slot on Rad TV everywhere for the next week. So tune in. You just hit radtv.com. You'll see it in one click. Everybody, thank you for listening. Alex, thank you, my king. We will talk soon. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Cam. You take it easy. Bye-bye.
We're living in a digital age, Rad TV's here, turn the page, creators getting paid from day one, monetize your content, let's have some fun. Web3 vibes, we're on the chain, decentralized, breaking the reins, multi-chain support, we're spreading the love, Rad TV's taking content above and beyond. Every device, we're everywhere, Rad TV beyond compare, streaming dreams, living large, get your stream pass, NFT, take charge. Rad TV, oh, we're breaking free, where creators thrive, and you can see from day one, getting paid. Join the fun, don't be afraid. Rad TV, it's all you need. Web3 power, we're in the lead. Stream pass, NFT, premium unlocked. Rad TV, we're never gonna stop. Apps on your phone, play Station 2, Ride TV, it's all brand new. From your couch or on the go, stream your favorite shows, let's roll. Creators rise, it's your time. Monetize, keep every dime. Ride TV's the place to be. Join a revolution, set your content free. Every device to everywhere. Ride TV beyond compare. Stream and dreams will live in large. Get your stream pass, NFT, take charge. Ride TV, all breaking free. Where creators thrive and you can see from day one getting paid. Join the fun, don't be afraid. Ride TV is all you need. Web3 power, we're in the lead. Stream pass, NFT, premium unlocked. Ride TV, we're never gonna stop.